Hello and welcome to Legal Basics with Cyber Law Global. Now, online, I see so many interesting phrases like people say unasonga mbele kama injili, others say no, unaoga na kurudi soko, isila bas naipeleka mbio ajab. I've not been able to catch up. But now, in that spirit of kuoga na kurudi soko, what happens when people have children? What happens when they move into other relationships or they come into relationships with children. So today we are going to talk about co-parenting and the legal dynamics of blended families that have become a reality in the 21st century. Remember when my grandmother was getting into her marriage, she didn't have children. The world was different that day. There was a lot of stigma around single parenthood. There was stigma around divorces. So whether it was a good marriage, a bad marriage, 10 children, 15 children, you stayed. But as things have changed, people have less children. They're able to sustain their needs so they don't stay in those relationships and they move on into others. But when you come into a relationship or a marriage with children, or when you move out of a relationship and there's children, so what happens to the parental responsibilities and the children rights? So to discuss these topics today, I'm joined with a colleague in the profession, a mentor of mine, and an expert in children matters. I will let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Sian, for having me. My name is Leah Kigwatha. I run a law firm called Kigwatha and Company Advocates here in Nairobi.
She's also a teacher.
Yes, I'm a lecturer. I lecture at the Kenya School of Law.
Yeah. So, Leah, when people say nasonga kama injili and naroga na kurudi soko, and by the time naoga na kurudi soko, for those who don't understand Kiswahili, it means I'm taking a shower and going back to the market. So when people go back to the market and there's children, or even decide to be single and there's children involved, and now we were used to planning together, and now suddenly we live in different houses. What is ideal co-parenting?
Ideal co-parenting when if the person with whom you had a child, you and that person are no longer in a relationship, the decisions that have to be made are usually about who is going to live with the child. And then the person who's not living with the child, how do they stay involved in the child's life? And then the other decision that needs to be made is that the child has needs which have to be met financially. How are those needs going to be split? Because the key legal principle is found in the Constitution, and what it says is that parents of a child have equal parental responsibility over that child, whether they are married to each other or not. So because of that equal parental responsibility, there has to be a determination of who lives with the child, because you're no longer living together. The other person who's not living with the child, how do they stay involved in the child's life? And then how do you divide and how do you split? How do you determine who takes care of what as far as the child's needs are concerned?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I if I was to maybe see what you said, I would come up with three issues that would be maintenance, access, and custody.
Yes.
So now on the issue of maintenance, I've seen a lot of things online, especially this week, people saying that, the law changed and now responsibility is 50-50. So if you take me to the children's court, I'll just pay half the fees, And I've tried to put my voice there and say, equal responsibility does not mean equal financial responsibility. Maybe you can explain that to the viewer, just the general attitudes of the court on how this is apportioned.
It's not as clear cut as that. Because equality is nuanced, and it's not, because if you are going to be ridiculous with equality, it would mean you split the child into two. In fact, I usually say that Solomon is supposed to be not supposed to be. Solomon is said to be the wisest man who ever lived.
Yeah.
And this wisdom arises from how he decided a custody dispute.
Yes.
So I have a lot of respect for courts, for the magistrates and the judges who are faced with custody disputes and maintenance disputes, because it's not an easy decision to make.
Sure.
So if you want to be ridiculous with that 50-50 is to say, with that equal parental responsibility, you can take it to ridiculous ends, but it's nuanced. Equality is nuanced. It's more complicated than that. The best interests of the child are taken into consideration. The specific situation that will work for that child are taken into consideration. And what the law is concerned about is really 5 things as far as maintenance is concerned: food, clothing, shelter, education, and medical cover. And the court is looking at the needs of the child. It's not looking at what you want for your child. Wants, entertainment and and those sorts of things. The law is concerned with food, clothing, shelter, education, medical, and what the child needs. So sometimes it may not come absolutely to the 50-50 you wish, because that if you are told pay half the food, pay half the clothing, pay half the shelter, pay half the school fees, pay half the half the medical, you will forever be fighting, because what that happen? Because
and it will also be half the hugs. I hugged on Monday.
I know
hug on Tuesday.
Yeah, that's
I nursed a wound on Wednesday. Nursed a wound on Thursday.
Yeah, so courts. You see, the more you fight, the more it's a toxic situation for that child.
Yeah.
So what the court is trying to do is to reduce the fights. And what I've seen the courts do to reduce the fight is to decide, okay, there are 5 needs. One person take care of 3, the other person take care of 2. The person, and then you do it, in terms of how much is food, how much is shelter, how much is, clothing. You do an average based on the needs of the child and the needs of an average Kenyan child. That's what another thing people need to realize. It's the needs of an average Kenyan child. Then also look at the income of the parties, of the different parties. So it's nuanced. It's not, it's not simplified when they say 50-50, and the law doesn't say 50-50. The law says equality.
Yes.
And equality is nuanced in every aspect in which it is applied by the law. It is nuanced.
It's not mathematical.
Yes.
Yeah. I like what you said, that, this is a child. And every time I've seen parties in a child dispute, I always advise them, if you can avoid courts first,
absolutely,
find another way to avoid the court, because this child is 18 years. It's not like land. We can say, okay, I'm taking that piece and that is closed.
And selling it.
Yes. If you start fighting when the child is 2, now we have even extended responsibility.
Until 24. You'll be fighting until
you're looking at a fight for 22 years. So what is the best way for people to go about it, even without looking at the courts? When people say this relationship is not working, but just because I'm not with you does not mean I'm not going to be there for my children. So what is the best way to approach it without having to have a judge say, so you pay, you see, what's the best way to go?
The best way to go about it is, one, if you can do it amicably without even having to put down the things in writing, you should go ahead and do that. You shouldn't feel pressure to have it in writing all the time. If you want a little bit more security, you can move to the level where you enter into something called a Parental Responsibility Agreement, where you sit down and determine what are the needs of your children and or your child, and how will you allocate them? Who will live with the child? How will the other person remain in the child's life? Or if you want to share the parenting time, in a way that you can, the child has 2 homes, how do you determine how that is going to happen? And you need to think through it in terms of what is best for the child. And then in terms of the needs of the child, you then agree on how that looks like. And the reason why this is the best approach is because you're the one who knows the peculiar needs of the child.
Yes.
Remember, when you go to court, the court is listening to 20 other cases on the same.
You're all strangers.
And yesterday they listened. So the court does not understand the peculiarities of your family.
This one is asthmatic.
Yeah.
This one is very sensitive.
This one is closer to the mother because of what?
Yeah.
This one is closer to the father because of this. Or, there is an auntie or a grandmother who is also in the equation, because the law is only concerned with the parents.
Yes.
And the needs of the children. So if you can do it yourself and get into an agreement, that is excellent, because then you are nobody knows your child or your children better than the 2 of you, and you're the best place to make this decision. In fact, the court should really be the last resort.
Yes. Now, this parental responsibility agreement, is it something that people can just sit with themselves even without going to a lawyer and say, come, let's agree, let's put it down in
Yeah,
writing?
absolutely. I think you can. If you need the help of a lawyer, of course you should get the help of a lawyer if there are things you want advice. Parental responsibility agreements are even drafted at the children's office. If you're unable to agree and one of you goes to the children's office, the thing that the children's officer will try and make you do is to agree and get into a parental responsibility agreement. And that's what the children officer usually does. So usually when people say, I've been summoned to the children's office, I think we need to change that language. It's not a summons. You've not been summoned. When the other person, although sometimes it's framed like a summons, it's not a summons. It's an invitation to the children's office to talk about the welfare of your children. So I'm usually telling people that don't take it as a summons. Don't be upset. Don't
feel like
defensive. Usually it usually gets there because there has been a breakdown of communication. And go to the children's office. The children's officer is not charging you with an offense. They are not accusing you of something. They are just inviting you to go and talk about the welfare of the children. And the outcome from the children's office is usually the outcome is usually a parental responsibility agreement. So parental responsibility agreements are done at offices of the children's officer. They can also, you can do it yourself in your own, sit somewhere in a restaurant and and write and agree, walk over to a lawyer's office, get it witnessed, or even have some of your friends as witnesses, and you'd be able to enforce it in future. So, yes, if you feel that, the balance of power is too, because that's also another complication. Usually people have disagreed, and so they've gotten to that place where there's their balance of power and communication issue.
You're moving on, and then you can have,
you can then go to lawyers and have lawyers discuss the terms. In fact, it makes it so seamless because your lawyer will be talking with the other lawyer, they'll be getting instructions from you. The other person's lawyer get instructions from their client, and the lawyers talk. And you see, between lawyers, there isn't acrimony. They haven't fought. They have not broken promises to each other. They're able to be focused and professional and focused on what's best for the child.
All right. Don't refuse to go to the children's office and say, Leah said it's an invitation. Please go.
Go, yes.
Go.
But I'm saying it's because people immediately get defensive.
I feel like
I've been made to be summoned, then you're upset at the other party and you're like, we can't talk because I've been summoned by the children's office. Exactly.
In fact, I've seen people who talk about the children's office and the children's court interchangeably, and they don't mean the same thing. So when they're called to the children's office, they believe they've been called to a court. But now in terms of the enforcement of the PRA, let's say at the point when we agreed, things were different. I mean, things change a lot along this way. Maybe I was working in this NGO that pays me 5 million, and then suddenly I've lost my job. Or now I have a new family, and now I have more children, and I'm not able to shop the way I wanted to according to the PRA. So how is it enforced when the other person feels, why are you not adhering to the things we agreed upon?
I didn't hear the rest of it. I heard about the NGO paying 5 million.
And then suddenly I've lost my job.
I want to know which NGO is that.
I'm not selling. I'm not selling. And then suddenly I don't have the money.
So, you informed it by going, what you can do is you can talk to a lawyer and then the lawyer or a legal aid organization, and then they will write a letter to the person and say, first, and because enforcing it as it is. You can enforce it as it is by having the other person reminded of their responsibilities. And if that doesn't happen, you can go to court to have the court enforce it as it is. But since you're saying you've now lost your job, that would mean you want to review it. Yeah, it's reviewable. You can call that person to the table again and say, when we agreed I was making this much and now I'm not making it
Or that time I had
anymore.
one child, now I have
Now I have other responsibilities. Let's review because all these responsibilities are
or your
my
situation has changed.
responsibilities. Yeah, whenever situations change, you're at liberty to have a sit down and review in the putting the best interests of the child front and center. And then if that doesn't work, you can go to court and ask the court to help you review the orders because there has been a change in circumstances. Because you see, children grow every day and life is dynamic.
Yeah.
It's not an agreement like other agreements which are sort of cast in stone, even though other agreements can also be reviewed.
Yeah.
But this one, because there are so many life changes, you can continue to review it. In fact, in the first one, when you do it, you can say, we'll review this every year. Or we'll review it every 2 years.
Drafting. That is good drafting now.
Or we will review it if any of us changes jobs or loses their job. Or we'll review it if the child reaches a certain stage or something happens, a milestone in the child's life. When you draft, you can put in a review clause so that every year you're coming back and discussing it, or every 2 years you're coming back on discussing it. Or you can say if there has been a substantial change in circumstances, we will be at liberty to
review,
to request a review. So it's reviewable because children are not static. Every day is changing and life
things change all the time.
Life evolves. Yeah.
Now, what is the attitude of the courts towards this PRA, irrespective of whether things have changed or not? Because I have seen a couple of courts that when the parties go before them, they say, "Oh, there's a consent. Where's the consent?" And then they just write terms of the consent and adopt it as a judgment. Yet sometimes even those terms were not negotiated when parties understood their rights.
It's okay. It's a good start. Remember, the court is not the parent of the child.
Absolutely.
The parent of the child has the first responsibility. I think it's a good start. Start there. This is what you had agreed. Let's start there. And then now you can tell the court either I didn't understand or this has changed. But it's a good start. It's better to start there than to start at the place where you're telling the court the story from the beginning. Or, your paternity is disputed. Or, I'm the father and this one is the mother. And listen, we lived together for so long and we lived here and we lived there and the child went to school. You see now, it takes, to get the background, you're using about 2 hours of judicial time.
Exactly.
And then you start arguing. Starting with a consent that if both parties are there and this is what we agreed, okay, you've already eliminated so much time that the judiciary will use. Then you can start from there. You can start saying, this is what we agreed. Okay, it's a consent. Then now we want to review it. Okay, then you can start saying why it was reviewed. I think it's still a better use of the time.
Okay.
Of saving because remember the judiciary it's a public resource.
Yeah.
Kenyans paying for the judiciary to continue to operate. So if you can, it's a good use of public resources because you're the parents of the children. First start with an agreement, and then let's take it from there. I think it's better to start that way than to start from the very beginning where the court is having to determine. Make a finding of every specific issue.
So it's advisable for
co-parents. I think
to
it's
have
better.
A parental responsibility agreement. And also it also looks at issues of custody, who lives with the children when, days, when do I
when do you see the other child? When the other parents see the child? How do you deal with birthdays? How do you deal with Christmas? How do you deal with travel? How do you deal with grandparents? It allows you to look into all those circumstances. And you see, when you do a parental responsibility agreement, you can insert all those things that are specific to your family. And
so they will go to Canada.
Exactly. Who will pay for the ticket? I will pick who
will meet at Java on Sunday.
Will be accompanied or unaccompanied. You can put the entertainment, you can put the clubs, you can put whatever. Because when you go to court, the court is not going to be concerned with all those things. The court is going to be concerned with food, clothing, shelter, education, and medical.
Okay.
But when you're able to agree, you're able to
put in all the details.
You're able to put in all the details that are important to you and to your child, as opposed to giving it to a third party to decide.
Okay.
Who is not the parent of the child.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, this is people who are together who have decided to move away. And a PRA sorts those issues. Now there's the others. There's the places these people have gone into. So Now we have Mr. John coming in with 3 babies, and Miss Linda coming in with 5. And we have a blended family of 8, for example, and they're all maybe children of tender age. Just as a lawyer and just looking at it from a bird's view, what are some of the legal issues you start to see in that situation?
You know, the interesting thing is that blended families look so easy on TV.
I
And in
know.
movies. But
Until
every
the
day, but every day, I think it's hard to blend families. The very first thing I see is that people are able to agree, and I usually tell people to expect this. You're able to agree, and you're able to have a reasonable co-parenting situation until somebody else checks in. Your ex has a new partner. Then suddenly the agreement that you had is no longer agreeable.
Yeah.
The children used to go, she used to live with the children. Now you want the children taken away from that situation.
So
Because there's
16, there's another man in the house. Yeah.
Not realizing that you yourself, your children have already met your partner 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And maybe she didn't object, And it's also the other way, where they're like, I don't want my children to go to the other mother, to another mother.
Starting to call her mommy.
They're starting to call her, yeah. Then there's the evil stepmother scenario that's usually drawn. So it becomes very interesting. So maybe that's something you need to think through from the very beginning, is that if because people start to say, I don't want my children to be introduced to the other mother, and they usually or to another man, and it's usually a valid thing, because first you're thinking, is this a long-term thing?
Yeah.
How many children?
How many boyfriends?
How many
will my
other
children
people?
see?
Yeah. How many boyfriends or how many girlfriends will my children see? Is this serious? So it's possible to sit at the beginning and
valid
decide, and say, when you move on, at what point will you introduce a new person? What is the extent of their interaction with the child? Are you going to leave the child with them for the whole weekend?
Or will they
Because
now
they are
come to the
safe?
school days instead of me,
Exactly, yeah. So those are things people can discuss. But I usually see that it usually really creates emotional upheaval. And even people who've been co-parenting reasonably and amicably, once another person comes into the picture, it can become acrimonious. And so it's important that you think about it in advance.
Yeah.
It's also important that you expect it.
Don't wait for it.
And also expect it of yourself.
Yeah.
Because I think you don't expect it of yourself. You don't expect that
To
if
be
this
upset.
person gets somebody else,
Yeah.
I will be upset. And
Yeah.
how will I react? So it's something that you need to think about. I don't see courts until it's been established that the other person is abusing the child or children. I don't see courts wanting really to get into that fight.
Yeah. There's the famous judgment of Justice Joel Ngugi, where the mother moved on to a different relationship, and the man moved to court wanting custody, saying now she's immoral.
Yes.
Yeah, and the court said that was a very old. That was a very old way that people looked at women, and we have moved from it.
Exactly.
Just moving on will not
Does
not
not mean
admit
that the
that
mother is
moral.
Yeah. So those are some of the things you have to sort of think about, expect of yourself that, and really ask yourself whether you are being overly emotional. Of course, you want to protect your children, but maybe those are conversations that need to be had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for people thinking about whether to get into a blended family or not, is there any automatic legal obligations that attach to a parent the moment they enter a domestic union? For instance, this Mr. John and Miss Linda who are wanting to move in or thinking about it. Is there any parental responsibility over these children that are not theirs that possibly attaches the moment you start to live as a family?
Yeah, of course. First and foremost, and let's call you're a step parent.
Yes.
First and foremost, you have an obligation to not harm these children.
Okay.
You don't think that you don't have an obligation. Yeah, you have an obligation to safeguard the interests of the children. Yes, as an adult in that relationship, you have an obligation.
You can't just misbehave and say, these are not my children.
Exactly, yeah. You have an obligation and you're required to safeguard the interests of the children, to look out for their welfare. Now, in terms of, for example, maintenance, there is no direct obligation. It's not an automatic obligation. However, the act says that in some instances, step parents will have an obligation to maintain their child. So, for example, if after you've lived with somebody and their children or their child or children for a long time, 5-6 years, you've been taking care of this child, you have been acting as a parent of this child. When you break up, you can't later in future come and say that they are not my responsibility. Actually, the act says you can be ordered to provide for
even
the child.
after the
Even after the relationship has broken down. So the thing is with the act, it's not as automatic as for parents, because you see the parent, the one for the responsibility of biological parents is in the Constitution, it's in the Act. There is no discussion about it. In fact, whether you're employed or not, because people say, "Oh, I'm not employed," and I recently had a court say, that, well, if we're going to look at employment, unemployment in Kenya is at 70% or something like that. Which means nobody will ever have to take care of their child if they are unemployed. But then for step parents, the court will look at very many factors. The act lists, how long they lived with the child, what's the history, what is their financial situation. So for step parents, there are all these factors that some parents want to be looked in for biological parents. But for step parents, there's a long list of things that the court looks like before it assigns parental
responsibility.
It assigns financial obligations on a step parent, but the Children Act does say that the court can assign parental responsibility to step parents. And there's also a case that was done by the Constitutional Court where this guy said, he can't take care of this child anymore because this is not their child. And the court said, no, you can't just walk in and out of a child's life. You can't. Once the mother loses favor with you, it doesn't mean that the child loses favor as well. And it was a constitutional case. In fact, he took it himself because he was saying his constitutional rights are being violated by the requirement to take care of a stepchild. And the court looked at the circumstances and said,
sorry,
and said, but you have to take care of them.
Okay.
So you have responsibility. And so what people need to know is that front and center of this conversation is the best interest of the child. And the best interest of the child trump and override all other considerations. I'm so sorry. I know people think strongly about their own rights.
I am not employed.
And their own.
I don't feel like giving her money.
Yes, exactly.
She
but
left
it's the rights. But it's the rights of the child and the interests of the child that take front and center. And the adult has to step back just a little bit. I know there are people who are not used to stepping back. But where a child is involved, you just have one of you is the adult, and you have to step back a little bit and prioritize the best interest of the child. Yeah.
Now, aside from financial obligation, does a blended family situation, is it possible for it to give a parent a right over the child? For instance, I move in with this gentleman, he comes with his children, and then I bond with the children and I consider them mine. And they get to a point where maybe the relationship does not work out, and I say, but I want to live with them.
I think it's possible, and the court will look at the circumstances. If it becomes a court case, the court will look at the circumstances and decide what's in the best interest of the child. Of course, because the biological parent has a higher priority, but the best interest of the child overrides that priority.
Okay. For instance, if it was a drunkard.
So the best interest of the child comes first, and then the parental rights then come second of the biological parent. And so there will be that balancing to make sure that the best interests of the child are taken care of. And then another way in which the blended family situation comes into play, the law comes into play, is when your spouse wants to adopt the child that you brought into the relationship, and you have to get the consent of their biological parent, because
the other parent,
their other parent, because it's
the one
your
who's no
child,
longer in this,
the one who's no longer in the picture, and you have to look for their consent. So that's also something people need to realize. That you need to look for
your spouse
consent.
can't just
can't just
adopt
take
your
over.
kids. The other one has to be willing to give up their parental rights.
They have to be willing to give
their
consent.
I think those are very interesting issues. But just to wrap it up, I know the issue of custody on its own has a lot of issues in this new world. I think maybe when we were younger, we hardly saw single fathers. I think nowadays there's more men who take care of their kids, and there's more children who are starting to live with their children. I've seen the courts are also shifting their attitude. They no longer consider so much whether a child is of tender years. They consider if it's in the best interest, they would rather give it to the father. And as we're moving towards that age, even the issues of custody are even starting to overtake the issues of maintenance in the children's courts. Now, maybe just to explain to the viewer, just lightly, what amounts to custody, and then what amounts to access. Because just like the splitting of a child, I think also people imagine that I can have a child live 3 days with me, live 3 days with you.
It works in certain situations. It has worked, and this is why I say people should really sit down and agree, because in certain situations it has worked. Where 1 week with dad, 1 week with mom. I have friends, especially in other countries, for whom it doesn't seem to be a problem. But I think in some people feel that destabilizes the children, having to move from one home to another. But then there are kids in weekly boarding. They are in boarding, they're in the school during the week, then they come home over the weekend. So it's very important to look at your child and see, will this destabilize them? Will it destabilize them to see their other parent only twice a month? Because many times you get alternative weekends because we are all working, and you can't take the one. All weekends can be taken away from the custodial parent. So I think different things work for different families. A lot of people feel that 1 week with dad, 1 week with mom would destabilize parents. But I think the thing that complicates it in Kenya, to be honest, in my view, is nannies. Because everyone has a nanny. So when you are sometimes taking the child not to go hang out with them, but to deprive the other parent, so you're raising your equal share to the child.
Whether I'm in or not, whether I'm tired, whether I want to go party.
I think that when we no longer have nannies, that's when we will know what it means to share. You're like, it's your turn. It's my turn.
You wash dishes.
Exactly. But I think because now people you take the child, you take them to the nanny. I've seen so many people take the child and take them to their mother. I'm like, that means you're not taking the child for yourself. You're taking the child to deprive the other parent. Hiyo tabia lazima tuache. Don't take the child for purposes of depriving the other parent. Take the child so that you can hang out with the child. But basically, where the paternity is not in dispute, because usually maternity is rarely in dispute. But where paternity is not in dispute, the idea is that the parents will get joint legal custody. They will have the right to make decisions over that child's life. And then physical custody is who will live with the child, which will be the child's primary home. And then we call it access. I hate the term access. I wish we would stop calling it that, because I feel like access means the child is locked in somewhere, and then you can come and you can come and see them for some time, spend time with them. Exactly.
You're fine.
I prefer to call it parenting time. In fact, when I draft my PRAs, I call it parenting time.
You don't call it access.
Yeah, so that you're splitting parenting time between the parents. When will you have parenting time? Because access usually sounds like the child is locked somewhere. So so then you have to decide which is the child's primary home, and then how will they spend time with the other parent? How will the other parent exercise parenting time? So even if you don't have you're not the child, that you don't have physical custody, you still have legal custody. And you will have time to spend with the child, which is parenting time. We need to stop saying full custody. People say, I got full custody. So I'm always like, you got full custody? The other person doesn't ever see the children. No, they see the children every other
That's not full custody.
That's not full custody. Do they make decisions on the child? Are they making some, are they going to be required to help with the financial obligations of the child? Then that's not full custody. So moms should stop saying, I got full custody. Because nobody really gets full custody.
This words are really thrown around here.
My lawyer got me full custody. So you didn't. You have joint legal custody. You have physical custody.
Actual physical custody.
You have actual physical custody that the child primarily lives with you, and the other parent gets parenting time, right? Which we usually call access.
Okay. And there used to also be the concept of visiting rights, which is starting to also leave our jurisdiction.
Yeah, because
We no longer see it because
visitation, right? How do you visit?
and visitation also started to bring other issues because it meant the other person came into this other person's home,
Exactly.
and they might not have been willing to have them
do
there.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think those are wonderful developments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Something else I think I need to say is about letting the other person know where you live. I know we don't want them to know, you know,
I
we want to
wouldn't.
exchange children at police stations.
I
Please,
wouldn't.
guys. You know, the act
Can
has
I
a
send a
schedule.
Java?
The act has a schedule of things
Uh-huh.
which determine whether you're going to be a good co-parent. And if you're going to deprive if it looks like you're going to deprive the other parent, then it's not in the best interest of the child. So those are some of the things, the conversations we need to have. The other person needs to know where the child is when they are with you.
Really?
Yes, because it's their child.
But okay, what if these are I think if the other person is a healthy,
Yeah.
if it's a healthy ex, that's fine. However, living in Africa and people being as territorial as they are, it's not very achievable to have a person who knows where you live and they really never disturb your peace. I think that's why people prefer to exchange children at Java. I don't think it comes from a bad place.
No, it's not necessarily having to come to your house, but they need to know you both. Because do you want to know if, let's say, that he's taking the child away for half the school holiday? Do you want to know where your child is for that half of the school holiday? Or you don't care as long as they are together?
I just need an assurance
they're
that
with
the
the
house is
parents.
safe. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that's a need for me. I don't know about the viewer. I don't
But
think that
anyway,
would be a need
the
for me
children are.
unless there's a situation of an emergency, which is unlikely. If I compare that to having my peace disturbed and the random people who show up and say,
You can get restraining orders for that.
yeah,
You can get the court
but not to
safe.
avoid that,
Yeah.
but you can't keep moving. Especially if it's a person who can't let go or a person who is dramatic.
It's in
Rather
the
bit of a
act.
Java.
Let me just say it's in the act.
Yeah, the
You need to know that it's in the act. It's in the act.
The act is not want children to be handed over at Java.
Yeah, of job I think is okay. My worry is when people say you want
Police
to hand over that police station. That's what the memory you want your child to have.
That's what good. That's traumatic.
That's how they were parented. They were parented in a very
that's not right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's something we need to consider.
Yeah. In fact, I think now since it's an episode on co-parenting, whatever you decide, you should always think about not just your child's interest, but even their psychological welfare. Yeah, and what they will remember, how those memories will be like. And remember, every time you fight, your children feel it. So the less you fight, the better. The more you avoid courts, the better. Yeah. I think it's been a wonderful episode. I'm hoping that Mwalimu here will be back for season 2 and season 3. She has lots to tell us. I've learned a lot from her.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. So if the viewers want to reach you, how can they reach you?
Look us up. Our website is kigwathalegal.com. On Facebook, we are Kigwatha Legal. And on LinkedIn, we are Kigwatha Company Advocates. Reach out and let's talk.
Yeah, reach out. She has lots to tell you, including that PRA with, what did you call it?
Parenting time.
Parenting time. PRA with fancy phrases like that. If you have any questions for us or compliments or suggestions, please write to us at info@smlawafrica.com. That's info@smlawafrica.com. You can also write to us through our old Gmail address, that is sirenlawglobal@gmail.com. Before we close our broadcast, we would like to say thanks to the Cradle Foundation for facilitating the shooting of this series, and to Mushiri Frames, who are our videography crew, are responsible for all these great videos. Take care of your children. Be peaceful parents. Bye-bye.
Kwaheri.